a lot of people don't listen to what Vladimir Putin says. I always encourage people to do so. It's a fool's errand if you don't. And his February 21st speech to the Russian Federal Assembly was quite enlightening if you just took the time to listen to what he said.
Yep.
And pretty much what he said is that Russia has become self-sufficient economically. The West is talking about how they can sanction Russia, how they can weaken Russia, how they can do, and Russia is saying, no, you failed. You see, we've actually divorced ourselves from you. We are working on a new economic reality based upon fiscal theories that are independent of the need for cheap Western investment. That was what drove the Russian engine before, the need for, cheap Western money to come into Russia and develop the economy, but develop the economy in a way that money that was made fled Russia. That day's over. Russia is investing in itself, and the money is being reinvested. And Russia's economy is growing, strengthening, despite the fact of sanctions and a war. And that kind of economic model, when transferred to a European economic union, a trans-Eurasian economic union of self-sufficiency, meaning they don't need Europe. They don't need the United States. They don't need any of this problem. They don't need to eat your poison. They can build this thing that is self-sustaining. That's the death knell of America's fiscal hegemony over the world. It's the end of the petrodollar's dominance and things of that nature. And that's the direction we're heading. It's a nightmare scenario for the West. They can't comprehend it because they've never allowed themselves to comprehend it because of hubris and arrogance that postulates that in the end we will win, they will fail. Well, no, we are failing, they are winning, and we're not prepared for defeat. So this is going to be a very interesting decade to come. Well, first of all, understand that sanctions is not a policy. Sanctions is the lack of policy. Sanctions is what you do when you don't have a policy. Sanctions are designed to make you feel good about doing nothing. So that's what sanctions are. And inevitably, sanctions, because they do fail, and because they get you to commit down a course of action, they inevitably lead to conflict. They don't lead to peaceful resolution. So sanctions are literally the dumbest policy in the world. They don't work. They never have worked. They never will work, especially against nations like, for instance, Iraq. Didn't work. Iran didn't work.
Yeah.
Russia, not working. China won't work. India, nope. I mean, we just go on and on and on. Sanctions don't. Turkey, nope, didn't work. They don't work. But what they do is they get politicians to commit to an issue without the cost. Meaning, instead of saying we're going to go to war on this is such a fundamental issue for America, we're going to war. It's a warlike action without the immediate consequences. But it's actually a sign of a failure of intellect, a failure of imagination, because what they don't understand is the vast majority of the times when you enter this sanctions-based approach, because it won't succeed, you end up doubling down on stupid, doubling down on stupid, doubling down on stupid, until you've gone so far down the path of confrontation that eventually the only policy left is confrontation. I think Americans should be grateful that Russia is going to win this war and win this war quickly. At least they should pray for it. I mean, we don't know the outcome yet. It hasn't happened. And anybody who thinks they know what's going to happen in all details is a fool. But I think the writing appears to be on the wall. We're getting to the point where I would feel confident betting on Russia in Vegas, and not feel that I would lose my bet. And the closer we can get to a decisive Russian victory, the less likelihood there is for a confrontation, because Russia's victory will defeat the trajectory. The longer this conflict goes, the more likelihood of American-Russian direct confrontation. But if Russia can nip this in the bud now, bam, win, and confront us with failure before we've gone too far down that line, that would be a good thing for America. because we don't need a war with Russia. We don't want a war with Russia. Unfortunately, the American people haven't quite come to that recognition yet, because they continue to cheer loudly for F-16s to Ukraine. They continue to believe that HIMARS and M777s and M1 Abrams can turn the tide of the battle. They continue to be ignorant about the horrific reality of the Ukrainian government and its ties to Bandera and neo-Nazi ideology. And so you take all this ignorance that defines the American approach towards Ukraine and you allow it to manifest itself over an extended timeline. That ignorance will lead to the inevitability of conflict. The sooner Russia can nip this in the bud, the better. And likewise, the sooner the West can be confronted with the failure of its approach towards Russia, maybe the sooner they'll recognize that a similar approach towards China will lead to a similar result, and they might look for alternatives rather than the sanctions-based confrontation that leads to the inevitability of military conflict. If we're hoping on the West to come to its senses on its own volition, though, that's misplaced hope. This is going to require a decisive Russian victory. And that means that, unfortunately, we're putting our future in the hands of Russia.